Thank you, friends, for tuning into the Family Enrichment Hub. I have the honor to wish us a very happy new year 2024. Stella Sano Bokelo is my name. And I'm going to be continuing our series on dating and courtship. And today I'm going to be speaking about intercultural stroke tribal differences when selecting a partner. A story is told of a lady who got married to a different tribe. And on one occasion, when her husband and herself were hosting the elders on the side of the husband, she decided to learn at least the basics of the greeting so that she could be able to greet the elders in her husband's language. So she got herself somebody to take her through what exactly she needed to do. And on an unfortunate note, this person who was coaching her in the way she was supposed to greet instead gave her obscenities in the language. So this lady confidently went to greet the elders in the obscenities in the language. You can only imagine the embarrassment, the shame, and the pain which arose from this kind of incident. Another lady also shared her experience of marrying into a totally different tribe. And one time when they had a festivity on the husband's side, they traveled to the village. And she assumed, like is the norm everywhere, that couples spend the night together. So she thought she was going to spend the nights that they were going to be in the village together with her husband. She was unfortunately told that she could not be sleeping with her husband. She had to sleep with the ladies, that is, her mother in law, her sisters in law, and other ladies. She said she was taken aback. She could not believe that this was the culture which was playing out before her very face there. Another lady also shared with me an experience which her sister went through. She said her sister also married into a totally different tribe. And her husband was living with his siblings before they got married. So when they got married, these siblings continued living with them. And she noticed that these siblings were free to walk into her bedroom and pick her personal stuff, her bras, her clothes, and use them and return them dirty for her to wash. So when she asked why they did this, they confidently told her, this is the culture you've gotten married into. Friends, I'm sharing these stories just to help us appreciate that sometimes intercultural and tribal relationships come with a lot of challenges. And so it's incumbent upon us who are marrying into different tribes and cultures to do our homework very well, to do our research, to investigate and find out what exactly happens so that you are not taken by surprise. And on that note, some of the things that you need to pay attention to, you're going to be confronted with language barrier. What will you do about it? You're going to be confronted with food differences. You're going to be confronted with greeting differences. For instance, if you're coming from Western Uganda and you're marrying into Buganda, in Western Uganda, people greet by hugging. In Buganda, ladies greet by kneeling. How are you going to reconcile these two things? Are you going to come and greet your mother-in-law, your father-in-law by hugging them? This is a totally different culture. And so these are issues that you need to confront before you eventually purpose to settle down in an intercultural relationship. You're also going to be confronted with issues of naming. In some cultures, naming rights are extremely elaborate. They are so detailed. In fact, they may even border on witchcraft. But in other cultures, it's just a family affair and probably religious activity. And that is it. So what are you going to do if you're coming from a totally different arrangement into this other arrangement where the naming rights are extremely elaborate? What will you do about it? Also look at issues of childbirth. Childbirth will be handled differently in different cultures. So you need to understand what happens on your side and see whether you can reconcile it with the culture where you're getting married in. And in some cultures in Uganda also, I notice men are over glorified, men are over elevated. A woman, you're not supposed to talk back at a man. especially if it is your husband. You cannot ask questions. You're supposed to be silent. You're supposed to get permission before you do anything, before you speak, before you volunteer your ideas. So men are overglorified and women are treated like doormats in some cultures, not all. So if you find yourself coming from a more liberal culture where marriage is taken as a partnership, it is relationship, it is equal footing for the man and the woman, and then you marry into that kind of culture, what are you going to do about it? Also, look at some cultures where children are initiated into alcohol while they are still infants. So if you're coming from a totally different arrangement, how are you going to reconcile that kind of issues? Also, explore issues of dressing. In some cultures, it will be a taboo for you to go greet your mother-in-law, your father-in-law as a lady while you're wearing trousers. In fact, you can even be excommunicated. That would be a total taboo. While in others, it is freedom. You're free to dress as you feel like. So when you come from a liberal environment and then you come to this strict environment, what are you going to do about it? Friends, also look at the issues of burial. And on this one, I have seen it, for instance, in Buganda here. When Buganda women get married into other cultures, when they die, they are not buried in their matrimonial families. Most of them are buried in their ancestral homes. So when you marry into the Buganda culture, you better be willing to take on the culture as it is. You're not going to resist and say no and do otherwise. The culture you find, that is the culture that you are going to work with. And on that note, friends, I was told a story of a couple where when the gentleman died, during the time of the burial ceremony, the widow was told that she needed to pick one of her personal items, precisely an undergarment, and drop it into the husband's casket. So if you're coming from a totally different culture and you are facing this kind of culture, what are you going to do about it? Friends, those are the issues that you need to confront, that you need to research on, that you need to understand before you enter an intertribal arrangement. And on that note, I want to share a few things that can be of help to you. First of all, you need to pray. Seriously pray. Seek spiritual guidance and direction from God because God is the author of all marriages. Do not enter an arrangement where you have not gotten clarity from the Lord that this is where He truly wants you to be. Get spiritual direction and you'll be comfortable in that kind of marriage. Another thing is be willing to learn. Be willing to learn the culture and decide whether you can actually cope or otherwise. Don't just enter because you're in love. Understand the culture of your spouse so that you can be able to tell whether indeed it fits you or otherwise. Be flexible and compromise, especially on things which are not against your values and your standards. For example, the language you can learn, the food preferences you can learn, the dressing code you can adjust, and more so if the dressing is not an indecent kind of dress, you can adjust on those. So be willing to compromise when you enter an intertribal relationship. Another thing you need to know is love your in-laws and be willing to forgive. Because in these kinds of arrangements, many times there are so many enemies created. People are whispering here and there, and you'll find yourself in a place where you're accumulating more enemies than friends. Be willing to forgive and let go. In that way, you'll reduce the load and the stress of this kind of relationship. Another thing you need to know is that you should know your danger areas. For example, if they tell you, don't enter your father-in-law's house, don't enter your mother-in-law's bedroom, avoid that. Those are danger areas. Keep away from them and you will be safe in that kind of arrangement. And also don't judge people based on their tribe. Judge people basing on what they stand for, what they believe as individuals, not just on their tribes. Another thing is be clear on your non-negotiables. If you notice your non-negotiables are in direct conflict with the culture where you're getting married into, why are you still in this relationship? Because clearly you are going to struggle. And probably another thing you need to know is you need to prioritize each other when you're in an intercultural relationship. Prioritize each other over the culture, over the tribe, over the region, over all these things that will find themselves on the table. Prioritize each other. And on that note, I want to share my experience with my husband. We are in an intercultural marriage. I come from Teso. My husband comes from Tororo. He's a Jopadola. And during the time when we were in secondary school, I was in Toro Girls School and my husband was in the immediate neighboring school, Manjas High School, and we didn't know it. Then A level we went to different schools and we met in the university. So when we met in the university, life happened. And he told me if he had met me before university, our relationship wouldn't have had a chance because he despised girls who studied in Toro Girls. And in the same spirit, I also despised boys from Manjas. I did not want anything to do with a man coming from Tororo, a Jap man precisely. I told myself it will not be from Tororo. But because we chose to prioritize each other and look beyond the tribe and look beyond the regions that we were coming from, our relationship was able to work out. And today I can confidently tell you, I am a beneficiary of an intertribal relationship. And so the question would be, can these relationships actually work? Yes, they can work out. Prioritize each other, communicate, and you will be able to go beyond the differences that have brought you together. Friends, as I conclude, the Bible teaches us in the book of Mark, chapter 7, from verse 1 to 13. The Pharisees came to Jesus and they were complaining and saying, "Why don't your disciples wash their hands before eating?" And Jesus said, "Why do you pay attention to the traditions of men? Why do you glorify human-made rules and regulations and you put aside the law of God?" Friends, when it comes to dating and courtship, do not pay too much attention to people's tribe, to where they come from, their regions, their groupings. Pay attention to people's values, standards, and what they stand for. That will help you in selecting a spouse right. Thank you for listening in. God bless you.